Agenda setting insight with our commentary on Reuters Breakingviews. Today's top picks: why shareholders are right to worry about Xstrata's CEO reward. China has the moral high ground in the EU carbon tax dispute, and shipping costs reach 25-year lows. What exactly does that imply? Let's ask Peter Tal Larsen, who's with me now. Peter, you've got a new take on the Xstrata Glencore story this morning. Everyone's talking about this premium, how big or how small or exactly what it's going to look like. You're talking about Mick Davis's contract promises in your piece. And what's the point you're making?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, it's Mick Davis. It looks like he's going to be the chief executive of this combined company, even though technically this is going to be a takeover of Xstrata, which he runs, by Glencore. And as a result of the takeover, we think he's going to get. There are certain clauses in his long-term incentive plan that get triggered on a change of control.
Yeah.
There's also. It would appear that in his contract he's entitled to a golden parachute from a change of control. And when you add it all up, that's sort of worth £14 million. Now, the reason this is important is because he gets these payments really regardless of whether or not he gets a good deal for Xstrata shareholders. So if you add this up and you say, well, he's been promised a new job at the top job at the new company. He's potentially making £14 million from a change of control anyway. Does he really have the Xstrata shareholders' best interests at heart when he's negotiating this deal with Glencore?
But these are proud men, right? I mean, they're going to get the best deal for their people possible, surely, in a situation.
Sure,
like
but also, I mean, our analysis has been that Glencore, there's a limited amount to the premium that Glencore can offer before it basically gives away the value of all the synergies to Xstrata shareholders. So there is a tension there, and yes, I mean, obviously they're proud men, and nobody wants to kind of come off as being seen to have done a bad deal. But it's still, for the Xstrata shareholders, it's still worth watching.
China has the moral high ground over dirty skies. You agree with their stance on this dirty skies?
I know, unusually.
Well, unusually, yeah. Why? Why do you agree with them?
Well, so first of all, I mean, this EU tax. I mean, there's nothing to say the EU shouldn't tax planes landing in the EU and say, well, you've got to pay a carbon tax. You can make that dependent on the size of the plane. But what the EU has done, which we think is wrong, which obviously China is objecting to, is to say the size of the tax depends on the number of miles that you have flown before you land in the EU, which is plainly extraterritorial as far as the EU is concerned. Because it's basically saying if you come from China or Australia, you've got to pay more than if you come from Finland or something like that.
Who else is complaining about it?
Well, I think the US also has some concerns about this, partly because of the extraterritorial nature, and obviously because the way it's structured, they're going to hit the most of it. So we don't object to the idea of a carbon tax, even though you can question whether it's actually going to do anything about carbon emissions. But we think China is absolutely right to resist this particular provision.
All right, and then the Baltic Dry Index, this sort of sexy index that everyone quotes. But I guess the point here is that cheaper freight costs don't necessarily mean slower trade growth. And everyone seems to assume when we look at the Baltic Dry and it's falling, oh no, this is bad news.
Well, because that's what everybody was looking at back in 2008, and it was seen as one of the main indicators of the global slowdown and what was happening in world trade. And of course what happened last Friday is we went back below. The index went back below where it was at its low point, 2008. So are we in a similar situation now? The answer is no, basically because we have overcapacity in the shipping industry. And it seems like we have the shipping industry responded to...
So hence the freight costs come down.
Yeah, exactly. The industry responded to the rebound in 2009 by ordering a load more ships and saying, well, things are going to carry on going. Yeah. What we've had since then is trade growth, but much slower than in the past, and so you have overcapacity.
So it's
and
the shipping companies that are suffering in this environment. The shipping
companies are suffering. The banks that have lent to them that are suffering. But that doesn't necessarily mean that world trade is falling off a cliff.
Okay, good, Peter. Many thanks for that. If you want to watch our US Breakingviews show, 12:30 Eastern every day, 17:30 GMT. I'm Axel Threlfall. This is Reuters.